Wind hammered the windows, rattling them in their frames. Rain fell in harsh sheets against the roof, a relentless percussion that made the entire house feel like it was shivering. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the storeroom for half a second, just long enough to freeze Zion's expression in stark white light. He looked torn, wounded and desperate, and I hated how familiar that expression was, because it mirrored my own. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice cracking. "Not in this room. Not tonight." His words stung. "Why?" "Because you think ignoring this will make things easier." No, his laugh was bitter. "Because being near you makes everything worse." I stepped closer despite every logical part of me screaming to stop. "Zion," I whispered, "tell me the truth. All of it." He shook his head, looking down at his hands. "You already know the truth." "Maybe. But I want to hear you say it." His breath hitched. A dangerous silence filled the room, one that felt charged, like the air right before lightning strikes. Finally, he spoke, each word slow, like he was lifting a weight he'd carried for years. "That summer, the one we never talk about. I thought it was just a phase. A moment of weakness. A mistake. But every time I see you, every time I even think about you, it comes back." I swallowed hard, heart pounding. "And when you left," he continued, voice trembling, "I thought distance would fix it. I thought forgetting you would fix it. I tried so hard." He looked up at me then. Really looked. "And tonight, when you walked into this room, it felt like every wall I built just," he snapped his fingers, "collapsed." The wind howled outside, as if echoing the collapse he described. I felt my own defenses cracking, not breaking, not yet, but cracking. "I didn't come back to make things harder," I said softly. "I didn't even know you still felt anything." He laughed again, but there was no humor in it. "That's the thing. I don't even know what I feel. Is it regret? Longing? Anger? Guilt?" His voice dropped. "All of the above." I took a slow breath. "We were kids," I reminded him. "Yeah. But tell me honestly." He rose to his feet, stepping toward me. "Does that make it any less real?" My pulse jumped uncomfortably. He moved closer, slowly, hesitantly, like each step required permission, but I didn't move away, which was its own confession. Lightning lit the room again, revealing just how close he'd come, barely an arm's length away. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm scared of what happens if I don't walk away. And I'm scared of what happens if you do," I admitted. That stunned him. He blinked, taken aback. "You?" "I didn't forget either," I murmured. "No matter how hard I tried." A sharp breath left him, pained, relieved, overwhelmed all at once, and then something changed in the room. The air thickened, not with desire, no, with recognition, with fear, with the sudden, crushing realization that both of us had spent years running in opposite directions, only to collide right back where everything started. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. "Tell me what to do." "You're asking the wrong person," I said, exhaling shakily. "I've been lost since the moment I saw you yesterday." He closed his eyes for a moment, jaw tightening as if he were fighting something deep inside himself. Then, very slowly, he lifted his head and looked at me again. Lightning flashed, thunder cracked, the wind screamed through the hallway. Everything outside felt chaotic, but everything inside felt suspended. "Still, dangerously still. Say something," he whispered. "Anything." I opened my mouth. No words came. What was I supposed to say? That I hated how drawn I was to him, that I resented our past for refusing to die, that part of me wished he'd stayed distant, cold, untouchable, because this version of him, raw, broken, honest, was far more dangerous. He took another step forward, close enough that I could hear the uneven rhythm of his breathing. Close enough that the storm felt distant compared to the turmoil between us. "You can walk away," he said quietly. "If you want to." I didn't move. "You can walk away," he repeated, voice lower, "and I'll let you." His eyes said the opposite. "You can walk away," he whispered again, "but if you don't," he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The unspoken ending filled every inch of space between us. A crack echoed, not thunder this time, but something falling in the kitchen. Maybe a utensil knocked over by the storm vibrations. Maybe something else, but we didn't flinch. Our attention was locked, completely, dangerously, on each other. "Why did you come here just now?" he asked, barely audible, because I couldn't stay out there, I said. Not with everything unsaid. And now? A beat of silence, another. I force myself to speak the truth, quiet but steady. Now I don't know if walking away is still an option. His breath shuddered for a moment, neither of us spoke. The storm raged outside, but the true tension was right here, between two people caught in a memory that refused to die. He lifted a trembling hand, not touching me, not even reaching fully, just raising it halfway, like he wanted to bridge the distance but didn't dare complete the gesture. I don't know what this means, he whispered. I don't know what we're supposed to do. Neither do I. His hand lowered slowly, but his eyes didn't, and in that fragile, suspended breath between two choices, two futures, something inside the house shifted. A door creaked in the hallway, footsteps, slow, deliberate, not ours. We froze, the sound drew nearer. Zion's expression tightened, his voice dropped to a whisper, "That's not my aunt." The footsteps stopped right outside the storeroom door, and in that instant, every emotion between us, fear, longing, guilt, confusion, collapsed into one single, chilling realization: we weren't alone. We never had been, and whatever was about to happen next was going to change everything. If you're ready, I'll continue with the falling action, 600 to 800 words, emotional, tense, mysterious, showing the consequences of this moment. Sunlight spilled through the thin curtains of the guest room, warming the stone floor and casting long golden bars across the mattress. For a moment, lying there, I felt something close to peace. The kind that comes when you're surrounded by old walls, old smells, and memories too faded to hurt. Or so I thought, but then I heard voices in the courtyard, my aunt scolding someone, pots clinking, a broom scraping along the tiles. Routine village sounds. Familiar sounds. The sounds of a life I had left behind, and then, under all of that, another sound. A low hum. A door creaking softly. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. I sat up, Zion. I didn't have to look. I already knew. It was the same way I used to sense him years ago, before everything changed. Before everything became heavy and complicated. Before silence became the safest distance we could manage. I got dressed and stepped out into the hallway. The faint smell of tea leaves and cardamom drifted from the kitchen. Sunlight filtered through the jar-cut windows, scattering patterned shadows across the floor. My aunt glanced at me and smiled gently. "Good morning," she said. "You look tired." "I'm fine," I replied, though we both knew it wasn't entirely true. Zion was sitting on the steps outside, sharpening a pocketknife against a stone. The metallic scraping echoed just a little too sharply in the quiet morning. His posture was relaxed, but his jaw carried tension. He looked up only briefly. Not enough to greet me, but enough to acknowledge I was there for some reason that hurt more than if he'd ignored me completely. I leaned against the doorway. "You're up early." I still remember the way the air felt that evening, heavy, almost swollen, as if it were holding a secret it didn't want to release. Our family house in the village always had a strange quietness to it after sunset, but that night, the silence felt different, tighter. The kind of silence that makes you listen twice. I had come to stay for a week, something I hadn't done in years. Life had pulled me away, and honestly, so had memories I never found the courage to face again. But when my aunt called, insisting the family needed help preparing for the annual gathering, I couldn't refuse. A part of me wondered if she sensed it, the tension I tried so hard to hide. The thing I never spoke about. The thing we never spoke about. My cousin, Zion, was already there when I arrived. He stood in the courtyard, unpacking crates of decorations as if nothing had changed. As if years hadn't passed. As if the distance between us hadn't been built deliberately, brick by uncomfortable brick. He looked up the moment my car stopped. His eyes locked on mine longer than they should have. A faint smile, too faint, almost cautious, appeared on his face. "Long time," he said, wiping his hands on his shirt. "Yeah," I answered, even though a dozen other words crowded my tongue. We hugged, but even that felt loaded, like there was a third presence between us, our shared memory, our unspoken history pressing its weight on our shoulders. Inside the house, everything felt unchanged. The wooden cupboards, the faint smell of sandalwood from my aunt's incense, the old clock ticking too loudly in the hallway. These tiny details wrapped around me like vines, pulling me back to a time I had tried so hard to forget, but the real uneasiness crept in when my aunt casually mentioned something that made my chest tighten. "Oh, by the way," she said while stirring tea, "Zion's been different lately. Quiet. Distracted. Keeps to himself." Her words shouldn't have meant anything. And yet, they did. Later that night, after everyone went to bed, I stepped outside to get some air. The moon hung low, casting pale light across the courtyard. And that's when I heard it, footsteps. Slow, hesitant, almost as if the person wasn't sure whether they should continue. I turned. Zion stood there, half in the shadow of the doorway. "You can't sleep either?" he asked. I nodded, though the truth was I hadn't even tried. Something had been tugging at me the moment I stepped foot in the house. A strange pull, familiar, dangerous, and completely unwanted. He walked closer, the air tightening with each step. "You know," he said quietly, "I thought you'd never come back here." There was something in his tone, something buried but alive. Something we had both agreed, without words, to bury years ago. But if it was truly buried, why did it feel like it was rising again? And why, deep down, was I afraid that I already knew the answer? "If you want, I can continue with high voltage sign rising action, 1,200 to 1,500 words, next." For a moment, the only sound was the storm fading outside, softening into a steady drizzle. The air felt different now, cold, heavy, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Zion stepped out first, shoulders tight, eyes scanning every shadow. I followed close behind, instinctively quieter than usual. Every creak of the floorboards felt amplified. The lantern light flickered, casting long, trembling shadows that stretched across the walls like dark hands. No movement. No footsteps. Nothing, but the absence itself felt wrong. "Or maybe they left," I whispered. Zion didn't look convinced. "Or they're waiting." The weight of everything that had happened, what he'd said, what I hadn't said, the footsteps, the fear, hung between us, thick and suffocating. We walked toward the living room, our steps uneven, hesitant. When we reached the main area of the house, my aunt emerged from her room, rubbing her eyes. "What are you two doing up?" she asked. "It's nearly midnight." Zion stiffened, his expression shifting instantly into something neutral, almost cold. "A wall slamming up. He always did that around her. Just checking the lights," he said casually. "Storm knocked some of them out." I nodded, backing up his lie, but the moment my aunt turned away, he avoided my eyes. Guilt, fear, confusion, all swirling beneath the surface. He wasn't ready to face what had almost happened in that storeroom, and neither was I. We fixed the lanterns in silence. My hand shook faintly, not from the cold, but from replaying the moment when he'd stood so close, asking me what we were supposed to do. And the footsteps, those slow, watching footsteps, echoed in the back of my mind. When the lights were finally steady again, my aunt went back to sleep. Zion walked to the edge of the courtyard, staring out at the wet tiles glowing under the lanterns. The storm had left everything slick and shimmering, like the world was still trembling. "You okay?" I asked softly. He didn't turn around. "You shouldn't worry about me." "I do anyway." His shoulders tensed. "That's part of the problem." I felt something inside me sink. "So what now?" "We pretend nothing happened." He exhaled, a long, tired, frustrated breath. "I don't know," he said. "I can't think straight right now." Rain dripped steadily from the rooftop, each drop echoing in the courtyard like a ticking clock. "You meant what you said back there," I murmured. "Didn't you?" He hesitated. "Seconds passed." "Yes," he said finally, voice low. "That's why I don't know how to undo it." The honesty stung more than the distance. "And you?" he asked quietly, without turning. "Did you mean what you didn't say?" My throat tightened. I didn't know how to say it. He nodded slowly, sadly. "That's what scares me." Before I could respond, a sudden thump echoed from the far end of the hallway. We both froze. Another sound followed, softer, dragging, like something being pulled across the floor. Not the storm, not the house settling, not imagination. Zion finally turned to me, eyes wide, the same fear from the storeroom returning in full force. "You heard that too?" he whispered. I nodded. We took a cautious step toward the hallway, but the lantern nearest to it flickered violently, dimmed, and went out. In the darkness, the dragging sound came again, closer now, much closer. Zion whispered, voice trembling with something more than fear. "It didn't leave." And before either of us could speak, before we could move, something knocked once, sharply, on the wall. Only a few feet away, the entire house fell silent except for our breathing, and whatever breathed back. Tob continued. For a long, breathless moment, they didn't even shift their weight. Whoever stood there was listening, waiting, for something. Maybe for us. Maybe for a sound we didn't realize we had made. Zion's eyes darted to the door, then back to me. His jaw tightened. His breath came shallow and quick, like he was preparing for something he didn't want to face. The storm outside raged on, but inside the storeroom, the silence was suffocating. Finally, the footsteps retreated, slow, deliberate, one creaking board at a time, until they vanished into the darkness of the hallway. Neither of us moved and neither of us spoke. Only when another flash of lightning briefly lit the room did Zion's shoulders loosen, just barely. "That wasn't my aunt," he whispered again. Not a question this time. A certainty, I know. He dragged a hand across his face, exhaling shakily. "I swear I heard someone earlier, before you came into the hallway." A chill spread down my spine. Who else would be here? I asked. I don't know. A pause. Or maybe I do. His voice dropped, words thick with something that felt like dread, but he didn't explain. Not yet. I took a small step toward him. Not to close any emotional distance, just to ground myself. The room felt unsteady, like the floor might shift beneath us. The lantern flickered, shadows climbing the walls like dark fingers. "Zion," I murmured, "what aren't you telling me?" He hesitated, his eye shifted downward, and for the first time since I'd arrived, he looked genuinely afraid. "There's been someone hanging around the house," he said slowly. "At night. In the early mornings." I thought it was my imagination at first. A swallow. It wasn't. My heartbeat quickened. "Why didn't you say anything to your aunt?" "Because," he paused again, frustrated with himself, with the words, with the truth, "because I didn't want her asking questions about why it was bothering me so much. Or why I was awake at those hours. Or why I kept checking the hallways." I understood what he meant without him needing to say it, because everything he did, everything he was thinking, had been tangled with me since the moment I arrived. And admitting fear meant admitting attention, and admitting attention meant admitting everything else. "I thought I was imagining things," he whispered. "Until now." Thunder cracked loudly enough to shake dust from the ceiling beams. We both flinched. "I think," he continued, "someone's been watching us." Another chill raced through me, and not because of danger, but because of the timing. Because whoever was out there hadn't just been listening to footsteps or noises, they had been listening to us.To, our voices, our confessions, our silence. I stepped back, suddenly aware of how small the room was. The air felt too thick. "We need to check the house," I said. "We will." His gaze shifted briefly to the door, then back to me, but first, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Whatever had just happened between us in this room, whatever honesty had cracked open, was hanging in the air, fragile and trembling like the lantern light. He took a cautious breath. "Are you okay?" The simplicity of the question pierced deeper than I expected. "I don't know," I admitted. His expression softened in a way that made my chest tighten painfully. "I didn't want you to hear everything like that," he said quietly. "Not all at once." "No," I said. "But I needed to." We stood there, still, silent, overwhelmed. The house creaked around us. The storm pressed against the windows. Somewhere a loose shutter slammed repeatedly, like a warning. "What happens now?" I asked, not expecting an answer. Zion ran a thumb along the edge of a wooden crate, eyes distant. "I don't know," he said. "Nothing about this is simple." "No," I whispered. "It isn't." He finally straightened, resolve, or maybe fear, settling in his expression. "We should check the hallway," he said. "Just to be sure." I nodded, but neither of us moved, because stepping into that hallway meant facing two unknowns. Who was out there, and what had just changed between us? Only after several seconds of quiet, steady breathing did he reach for the doorknob. He didn't open it right away. His hand lingered there, unmoving, with one last flicker of hesitation. "Whatever happens next," he said softly, eyes meeting mine, "don't pretend you didn't feel it too." Before I could respond, he turned the knob slowly. The door creaked open. The hallway stretched before us, dark, empty, silent, too silent, and somewhere in that silence, something waited, unseen, unspoken, and far from over. "If you want," I can now write the conclusion, cliffhanger, 400 to 600 words, dramatic, unresolved, emotional, final twist. The evening had that strange quietness that never felt natural, not peaceful, more like the world was holding its breath. I remember standing by the narrow window of our apartment, watching the last streaks of orange fade behind the neighboring buildings. The city lights had just begun flickering on, one by one, like nervous eyes opening in the dark. The fan hummed softly above me, warm air brushing against my skin, but something inside me felt cold. Heavy. Restless. Maybe it was the weather, maybe it was me. Or maybe it was him. Adil had been gone for most of the afternoon, and even though he wasn't obligated to tell me where he went, his absence left a strange emptiness in the apartment, like someone had gently scooped the air out. We weren't lovers. We weren't enemies. We were something in between. Something I didn't have a name for, something I wasn't supposed to think about as much as I did. I tried distracting myself, cleaning the kitchen counter, folding laundry, pretending to watch some meaningless show. But every few minutes, my eyes drifted to his closed bedroom door. I could almost hear the echo of his laughter from earlier that morning, the way he'd brushed past me in the hallway, sleeves rolled up, hair still damp from the shower. Too close. Too casual. Too much. Stop thinking about him, I muttered to myself, fingers curling into the edge of the sofa. But thoughts don't listen, especially forbidden ones. A sudden sound broke through the silence, a soft thud from somewhere inside the apartment. My heart leaped before my mind caught up. It could have been the wind, or the pipes, or my imagination. But something about it felt intentional. Deliberate. I hesitated, my breath tightening. Should I check? Should I wait? Should I ignore it? My feet moved before I made a decision. The hallway stretched ahead of me, narrow and dim. Light leaked from beneath Adil's door, a thin golden line across the floorboards. Strange. He always turned the lights off before leaving. Is he back? I whispered, but my voice sounded too small. A chill ran through me, not of fear exactly, but anticipation. The kind that prickles at the base of your spine when something is about to shift, something you can't undo. As I took another step, I noticed it, the faintest movement of the door, as if someone inside had just let go of the handle. Slowly. Quietly. My pulse hammered in my ears. Why didn't he call out? Why didn't he open the door completely? Why did it feel like he was waiting for me, specifically me? The silence between us, between that slightly open door and my trembling breath, felt charged, magnetic, dangerous, and in that moment, I understood one thing with absolute clarity. Tonight, something was going to change, whether I was ready for it or not. If you want, I can now continue with rising action, 1,200 to 1,500 words, in the same tone and structure.